Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I am so excited for today's topic because this is something that I feel like I really needed when I was starting my business. I feel like everyone on the internet tells you what to do. Everyone on the internet tells you that you need to do this funnel or do this offer or do this marketing or do XYZ. And frankly, nobody tells you who to be. And you and I both know that when you become an entrepreneur, it is like the most intense personal development journey that basically anybody can go through. And there's like no manual as to how to navigate it. What kind of qualities or skills do I need to develop outside of the classic things of like marketing and selling and branding and things like that? Like I want to know, how do I become the person that I need to be in order to become a successful entrepreneur? And so it kind of got me thinking about this quote that I heard, which was that you don't have the business that you want to have because you haven't become the person to run it yet. And it was a quote that I heard from my mentor that he, I think, heard from somebody else. And when it got passed along to me, it was really something that was helpful for me as a reframe. Because I remember, and you guys have heard me talk about this on other episodes, that I was told by a mentor that I didn't have a 7-figure business because I wasn't operating like a 7-figure entrepreneur yet. And that hit home for me. And then hearing it as another kind of like reminder recently from my mentor, I was like, okay, like there's just a lot of conversation around like who you need to become in order to be successful. But no one says what that is. Like it's always like there's, the mindset things and then there's the skills that you have to have, but like there's not really any consent like, hey, these are qualities you're going to want to develop if you want to succeed long term. So then got me thinking, well, what are those skills? Are there really non-negotiable skills for an entrepreneur to be successful? And I would argue that there are. And, we probably will do like a part 2 to this episode, frankly, because there's a lot of what skills and aspects you need to have mastered are in order to be successful long term. But I wanted to start with some of the first couple that you're going to want to consider if you are somebody who feels like you are either new to entrepreneurship and you kind of want to know how to start to put in the reps to really be successful, or whether you're somebody who's been in this for a long time and you want to sharpen some of your skills. So, today we're going to be going through some of the non negotiable skills that you need to have to be a successful entrepreneur. And, I want to also give you a stat because 50 to 70% of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship type ventures will fail within the first 5 years. And so, it really puts in context that, and it's not to be cynical, but not all of us are going to succeed in this. Not all of us are going to soar in anything that we create and that we develop. And so, if we really want to be the people who end up on top, we want to be the people who end up successful, we have to train as such and we have to develop as such. And so, I want to give you some clear skills to develop. And listen, I have talked about the fact that I think everyone, if they should desire to develop, can become an entrepreneur. I don't think that there's like this innate, the nature versus nurture, if you will. Like, I don't think that it's a matter of like you're born to be an entrepreneur. I think that there are skills that lend themselves very nicely to being an entrepreneur. But what I will also say is that you can develop those skills. You can decide that you're going to choose to put in the reps to develop those. And so the question really becomes, do we know what those are in order to take some action on them? So today we're going to be going through a couple of the different skills that, upon reflection, I think are really, really important for myself that I've really dove into, and also for my clients, or the people who've been very successful, some of the traits that have made them that way. And so the first one that I think is the natural one is the aspect to be able to take like calculated risks. Because I think a lot of the time, being an entrepreneur, even starting a business, frankly, is a risk. You don't know if it's going to work. You don't know if this is something that, is going to last a long time. You don't know how the market will respond. You maybe don't even know what you're doing. You could be going in completely blind to what it takes to be able to run a business. And I think the word calculated is important because often entrepreneurs get this bad rap, right? Of the fact that they're just like really risky and they're just throwing it all on the line. And listen, there are those segments of entrepreneurs that do that. There are people that will not see the signs that something is not working and they will just keep working it and going and going and going and going. Even though it's going under, they will just keep going because they have such passion and they have such connection to their mission that they refuse to see otherwise. So some people will just naturally take risks. They're not calculated, they are just risks. But I think the ability to take calculated risks is a really big thing in entrepreneurship because if you are somebody who feels that you have to have safety, that you have to have everything figured out in order to make a move in any shape or form, you are going to struggle in entrepreneurship because it is something that requires you to challenge yourself to move with oftentimes not all of the information in front of you. And kind of my perspective on this is that I always try to have like 70% of the information that I need to be able to make a decision. And when going into things, there's often times that I see a lot of what won't work or might not work. And yet I have to act anyways. And so, even like when I first started the business, it was very much a risk for me to go into this. I didn't have necessarily a massive savings behind me if it didn't work out. I didn't have anybody in my family who was an entrepreneur, which we talk about in earlier episodes of my story. I didn't necessarily have anything behind me. And going into this, it was absolutely a risk because I didn't know what was going to happen. But for me, I did know that if I was to pour myself into this and really, really work my butt off, I had examples of people around me who were successful at this. And I was like, I know for a fact that if I execute on what they're executing on and I work even twice or three times as hard, I will see momentum if I just don't take my eye off the prize. And so I think, starting entrepreneurship for me was such a big risk. And then I think also, in any instance in the business, as you're working through it, you're going to have situations where you don't have everything you need. And it's this aspect of like trust. I think the calculated risk aspect of that skill is also kind of slash or coincides with trusting yourself. Because when you are presented with an opportunity and you don't have everything you need to feel like it's a safe decision and you're kind of like, oof, this is a little bit risky, it really does stem down to how much trust you have in yourself to take that move. And if it's to make a big investment, if it's to make a big decision in the business, if it's to really take any type of action, your ability to take those calculated risks as an entrepreneur stems back to you. And so I think it's also really important if you are somebody who wants to succeed in this long term, that you have the ability to trust yourself and you have the ability to know that you keep your word and that you will be resourceful and do what it takes. But it all still comes down to being comfortable with taking risk. And so it's interesting to me when I see entrepreneurs who feel that, anything risky, they're like, oh, I can't do it. And I'm like, Susan, this is what you signed up for. This is what you signed up for. This is what the journey and the process is going to be. This entire thing every day as an entrepreneur is risky. It's risky to try something in marketing. It can be a calculated risk to try a sales approach. It can be a calculated risk for a hire that you kind of have this gut instinct you need to hire, but maybe there's no logistical or kind of fundamental aspect to it. You just feel that like this is the person you need to bring onto your team. Things in business, regardless of all the different logistics, you just have to at some point jump. And so I think it really is, this aspect of jumping and just trusting that the parachute is going to happen at some point, right? And really allowing that to be the basis of how you make decisions. Because I have seen this time and time again. I have seen people who get stuck in entrepreneurship and they get stuck in their development and growth because they refuse to act or to move if they feel that it's at any point or at all even 0.5% risky. And that's why I go back to the 70%, because if you have 70% of the information, you've got enough to move. And, the thing that I often will tell people is at the end of the day, which is something that I actually learned in my journey as well, is there's only 50% of what's going to happen. It's going to be option A or it's going to be option B. And so even in entrepreneurship, 9 times out of 10, even though you've planned everything to a T, there's still the option or the room for error that something can go a different way. And so you do the best with the information that you have at the time. But if you want to succeed long term, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and sitting in risk and realizing that if you want the big reward, if you want the big outcome, you cannot have the big outcomes without any aspect of risk. And so for myself, when I try to go for these big outcomes, let's even just like really simplify it, right? If I'm going for the big outcome of wanting to be an entrepreneur and wanting to make multiple 7 figures using the internet and social media, I might have to take the risk on starting to post, leaving my job and starting to go all in on social. I have to at some point get uncomfortable. And I have realized that the people who stay in the comfort are the people who stay stuck. And so if you are in a place where you're like, okay, I need to grow this business, I want to grow this business, ask yourself, are you actually taking risks? Or are you playing it safe? And like, listen, I want to be honest with you. I have played it safe at times in my business too. I have had moments where I recognized that I was playing in the safe zone because it felt more comfortable for me. But I also, in those moments, realized like, oh no, Kate, you're not growing at the rate that you could be because you're not putting it all on the line. And so I want you to ask yourself, are you taking calculated risks? Are you really looking at the information in front of you and realizing that you don't need more and that you have everything you need to move, but you just have to take action? And so I think taking calculated risks is one of the key essential non-negotiable skills. Now, the next non-negotiable skill to me is the ability to handle feedback and criticism. And most importantly, to be able to have feedback or criticism or, data basically presented to you and that not necessarily become your entire story. Feedback and criticism is a natural part of it. And it's when someone comes into entrepreneurship and they're super comfortable. I see this all the time. People are super comfortable around praise and positive feedback. They love when a post does well. They love when their team praises them. They love when clients are killing it and saying, "You're amazing." But when the post doesn't do well, or the marketing doesn't do well, or the clients say, "Hey, you know what? I didn't feel supported in that moment," or your team says, "Hey, I'm not feeling fulfilled right now." It's like this shock and awe factor of, "Oh my gosh, this person said this or this situation happened." And I'm like, yes, because both are needed for your development. And it's your ability to not put too much weight into the positive and also not too much weight into the negative that allows you to stay balanced as an entrepreneur. But the key essential element, in my opinion, is not only being able to accept criticism or feedback, but honestly, the comma to that would be the fact that you seek it. You seek feedback and you seek criticism because you are in a mindset or a perspective that you actually desire to develop and that you recognize that your development is oftentimes not going to come from your positive words of affirmation, but in the areas that you don't know or that you haven't been diving into. So, your relationship with the desire to get feedback and criticism is an essential skill for you long term, especially if you want to grow and scale quickly. And it's hard, it's a muscle. It's the ability to really be able to sit and humble yourself, realizing that you don't know everything and that people in your world and your community, this can be your clients, it can be your team, it can be your audience, it can be people in your life, family, friends, whatever it may be, you need to be open to having feedback because you can't see everything from your perspective. And so then when we go into building a business and we're like, "Oh no, it's my way," you've got your blinders on. And if you are not open to feedback and criticism, it means that you only see your perspective and your path when there could be tons more other information that you could be taking in right now. But because you're not open to it, you're only operating and making decisions from your perspective and your view. And so not only do we have to be open to feedback and criticism, but also the stories that we tell ourselves from it. Because when someone gets criticism or someone gets any aspect of, I should say, quote unquote, negative feedback, right? The important thing to me is what story do you take from it? Because if someone gives you feedback and somebody gives you criticism, and the first thing that you do is spiral into, "Oh my gosh, this is it. This is going down. What does this mean about me?" Right? You're instantly pulling a story from it instead of saying, "What is the invitation here? What facts were presented to me? And with this information, what do I want to do about it?" And sometimes you will get feedback and criticism that you don't need to act on because it's just someone voicing their emotions or voicing their opinions. But sometimes in getting feedback, there is validity to it and there is information in that that you can use as an asset. But if you have a story in receiving that, it blocks your ability to see that as a potential solution for you. And I actually see this oftentimes when it comes to the client experience for people. I have clients who've come to me and said, "Kate, this client is not happy and I don't know what to do. And they said this, this, and this." And so I'm like, okay, well, first of all, there's, managing the feeling around it, which is the fact that it can feel very jolting to have negative feedback. But we also want to remember that there might be validity to this. So, like, seek to understand, what was the person going through? What did they express to you? And is there any factual aspect to what they're explaining? So, like, if they say, for example, to a business owner that I worked with, "Hey, I feel like you dropped the ball." My question is, well, did you drop the ball? Right? Because if you did, let's own it. Let's use this as an opportunity for you to develop and for you to expand. And so when people often as business owners are frankly insecure, it ends up leading to them closing themselves off to conversations. And when you close yourself off to conversations, you're closing yourself off to feedback. And when you don't have feedback, you're living in your own echo chamber. And so your ideas and solutions and problems are only those that you see, which are a very, very segmented view of the whole. And so, if you want to grow and succeed long term, it really becomes how do I not only have the ability to hold space for feedback and criticism, but how do I also potentially seek feedback and criticism? And I want to know what people are thinking, feeling, saying, and what's coming up for them, how I can understand it better. Because if I understand that, I'll know how to fix it. If I only know my perspective, I'm only fixing it based off the information I have, which again, maybe 20% of the 100% that's actually out there. So asking yourself, where are you asking for feedback right now? Do you ask for feedback from your team, from your clients, from your community? Are you open to criticism, or as soon as you hear it, do you shut down and say, no, 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 that's just so and so's opinion. That's not me? Right? How open are we to creating space to really understand and unpack it? And how can we make this in more of a consistent fashion? How can we structure this into the business? For example, for team, it can be having a form that is an anonymous form where people can send in feedback. It can be asking for feedback on a team meeting. It can be asking for feedback from your clients on your office hours or a Q&A call that you have or a group call. Like it can be structuring this into the structure of the business that allows you to constantly get that, but making sure that you have that door open. And most importantly, to recognize that the way in which you respond to the feedback will determine the amount of feedback that you get. Because if every time that you get feedback, the way in which you reply to it is, well, that's not true, or that's not what I did, or that's not how it was supposed to be, and you're kind of instantly close off to it, and it's very clear that you're not receptive to it, you will not get feedback. People will not feel safe to come to you. And so if you create a safe space to say, hey, I want to know, I'm curious, I desire to understand what's coming up for you, you create an environment where people want to reach out and it will actually benefit you long term in the business to do so. So, the other non negotiable skill that I think is essential is adaptability. You need to be somebody who is comfortable with pivoting. And I actually talked about this actually this morning on my stories on Instagram because I think so many business owners have this preconceived idea of what it's going to look like in their head. They have this idea of what their launch is going to look like, their team is going to look like, their vacations are going to look like. Like everything has a certain vision and a certain plan of it's going to look like A, B, and C, and it's all going to work out this way. And the tricky part with that is when you're rigid and something happens and you're not adaptable, it completely throws you off. The analogy that I used today when I was talking about this on stories was that, I explained to a client that when things are happening in your world, it's kind of like the wind and the storm that you're in, right? It's like the wind increases and decreases in speed. It might be blowing from the left, blowing from the right, right? Like there's many different experiences that you're going to have with the wind or the ecosystem in your business. You cannot and should not be blaming the wind. Instead, adapt your sails. And it really does correlate to business because when you're going into business and you're not adaptable, what it means is that you basically are going to feel the impact of everything because you're so rigid in the plan and what it's supposed to be or how it was supposed to go or the timeline of it or the speed of it or the results of it. Instead, I look to see, okay, what is the opportunity? And so the opposition is the opportunity, is kind of the main thing that I would typically say to clients. Your opposition is your opportunity. So if you're in a situation right now where you have a pathway presented in front of you, you have two options, which is to say, well, this wasn't part of my plan. And this is not what it was supposed to be. And, I didn't think it would happen in this timeline, or I thought it would happen faster, slower, easier, whatever it might be. You can look at that, or you can also say, is there an invitation here for me to develop? Is this an opportunity or a pathway that I could go down that could actually benefit me long term? And a lot of my journey has been this. It's been adapting. It's been adapting to invitations for certain speaking opportunities and saying, well, I've never spoken on stage before, but I guess I could. And so then it became a speaking opportunity. Or marketing. It could be, this marketing feature that we used daily got deleted and was no longer a feature. And we were like, okay, well, we could just not do that. Or we could take that concept we did and maybe reinvent that in some way. And so it was the ability to adapt the plan. And the thing that I think slows so many down is the fact that when they have to adapt, they get into the story of this is not how it was supposed to go. And that process of the processing or the death of the plan, if you will, is something that causes a lot of delay. And so instead, what I like to do rather than have this really rigid plan is instead go with the mindset of here's my intention. Here's the vision of where the end place is that I want to get to. And I open myself up to the fluidity of how I'm going to get there. And so, even in entrepreneurship, there has been so many pivots in my journey that I've had that I knew I wanted financial freedom. I knew that I wanted to have time freedom. I wanted location freedom, but I didn't necessarily know exactly what it was going to look like. And so I didn't tell myself it had to be this box or that box. Even going from, the fitness space to the business space, that was not something that I ever pictured myself doing. It wasn't part of my plan, but it was kind of all the pieces were aligning in front of me. It was almost like the stones of the path were being placed as I was walking. And I think the ability to feel comfort and feel at peace in those moments is what really allows entrepreneurship for you to be an easier experience. It's a skill you have to develop. You have to be comfortable with allowing those stones to be placed as you walk. And too many business owners need the entire pathway for the next 15 yards to be seen in front of them for them to keep moving their feet. And so the adaptability to be able to adjust to your environment and also to realize that you can't control your environment is a skill that you have to have, because if you don't, you will constantly get stuck in this cycle of ruminating on what is not going the way that you want, instead of you actually seeing the invitations or the opportunities in your environment of what could really serve you right now. And so being adaptable is like one of the key elements, because you are going to get hit every way, every way in business. And your ability to respond to that and what mindset you have when those situations occur is really the difference maker of your success. Now, another one that I think is really, really important is vision, and really having a vision and tuning into that vision consistently, and also sharing that vision with other people, because vision to me is different than destination. A lot of business owners have outcomes. They have, I want to achieve this number. I want to achieve this amount of followers. I want to have this many enrollments. I want to have this thing. I want to get to this destination. But I think instead, a vision is something that is more of a full picture. It's something that really is a larger why. It's giving detail and color to what you would like something to look like when you're going after it. And it's bigger than you. It's not this, one milestone. It's something that has fluidity to it. And so when you're looking at vision, vision is so important, because if you are somebody who doesn't have vision, you are only in your tiny little frame of perspective. And when you do that and you have a resistance that happens in business, you have a situation that happens, all you see is the situation in front of you, because there's nothing larger to tap into. And so vision is really the basis, in my opinion, of what grounds us in our perspective as we go through this crazy roller coaster called entrepreneurship. Because your vision is what you're going to tune into when you are trying to communicate that to other people, to get other people on board. You need to know it before you can ever lead somebody else to come with you. Vision is what you need when you are having these doubts of like, is this the way? And is this the decision? And is this the move? And trusting yourself and where it is that you're going. And the thing that I see often when it comes to, even for our personal lives, right? We have vision of what we want. We have the vision of the family we want, the partner we want, the life that we want. And, your partner, you didn't say he had to have dark hair and he had to have green eyes, right? Like you just said, this is the kind of essence of the person that I want to be with. And the same thing needs to be applied to your business. So many are saying the equivalent of he has to look this way, she has to look this way. I need to have specifically 3 kids, 2 of which are girls, 1 is a boy, right? Like the nuances of the specifics are not really vision. And that's what's happening with business, is that people are talking about, I want the 10K month or the 20K month. That's not vision. Vision is the essence and the emotion and the principle around what it is that you're looking to achieve, and realizing that you also have to be open to the process of how that presents itself. And so when we're looking at vision, we need to also remember that vision is something that you need to adapt as you grow. The vision that I had when I first started the business years ago is not the vision that I have today. That vision has developed as I have developed. And it's been my invitation to constantly develop that vision so I can really tune into like, okay, well, what is it now? What is it now? What is it now? And painting it and giving it more color. And so vision to me is what allows people to really create something truly great, truly great. Because if you are focused on the milestone in front of you, we're not really creating anything bigger. People often talk about impact, right? Like, I want to make an impact. I want to make an impact. Well, can you even really give description to what that impact is? How would you describe that impact? What does it look like? What are you actually going to do to create change in the world? What are you going to do to create change with this business? Where is this business going? And if you couldn't describe where your business was going based on revenue, how would you describe it? And that question rocks people, by the way. Because many of us, when we're going into business, I'm like, so what's the vision? They're like, I want like a 7-figure business, or I want to have this offer, or I want to have this. I'm like, but if you couldn't describe it based off of just the amount of money that you're creating, what is the vision? If you wanted to describe the vision for the business without making it revenue focused, how would you describe that? And that is an exercise that I really suggest to people because I basically look at going through almost like the wheel of life. If you literally look this up on Google, you can look up like the wheel of life. And the wheel of life basically is the core prongs of all the things that we master or lean into when we're building out our vision for our life. We have our social, we have our health, we have our, personal development goals. You need to have a vision that's multidimensional other than just revenue. And so having a vision that is rooted in something that is fluid and that is also not just segmented on a number is so essential, not only for your success, but for your client's success, for your team's success, for everybody that is influenced by you and also your business. And this kind of segues as well into the next that I think is really the difference maker of the people that are the most successful in my world. And it is personal development. I have mentioned in other episodes, the fact that, I wasn't always into mindset work in particular, but I'm somebody who's always really put emphasis on personal development because I'm the firm believer that we really are never done. Like your work on yourself is never done. You always have areas that you need to refine, that you need to develop, that you have limiting beliefs that you're not aware of. You have reservations that need to be unpacked. You have habits that maybe could be adjusted. You have areas that you can refine right now. And it's your desire to actually investigate those areas and not push them under the rug that is the difference for you in your business. And frankly, I've seen it time and time again with business owners in our world, which is that people think strategy is the way. And listen, I'm a type A girl, okay? I am just as type A as they get. And I will tell you, I love strategy. I love structure. I love systems. I love processes. I love frameworks. I love all that stuff. I nerd out on it. However, there's this other aspect, which is you as the person. And this idea that your business is only going to grow because of the things that you're executing or the strategies that you're integrating is just not the case. You may very well be the lid of your business. Your business is never going to surpass your level of development. And so if you're wanting to have a big business, say you want to have a multiple 6, a 7, a multiple 7-figure business, your business will never surpass the level of development that you are currently at. And so when someone comes to me and they're trying to figure out like, why is it that my business is not growing? I just don't understand why we're not getting past this place. Truthfully, oftentimes I'm not even looking at the business. I'm looking at the owner. Because if something is not clicking, it is very likely and very possible that it actually has nothing to do with the strategy alone, but that it's more a matter of who's operating it. And so that's actually oftentimes where I start. So if you are somebody who wants to grow in your business and grow significantly, one of the most important things that you can do as a skill is constantly see, where can I change? Where can I develop? How can I be better? How can I develop my habits, my mindset, the way that I communicate? How can I develop the way in which I approach problems in the business? How can I develop my own internal dialogue that I'm having? How can I, develop the way that I connect and interact with other people? All of these are areas that you want to consciously decide to dive into. And by the way, not only when problems occur, preventatively. I am constantly looking at where is it that I need to change? What am I not focused on? What language am I using that's not serving me? And even one of the things that came up for me recently when it came to personal development was realizing that I was constantly using the word could, or I would do this, or I might do this, or maybe. It was always this aspect of like lack of certainty around things. And I had somebody in my world who was like, no, no, you will. And I'm like, what? They're like, you will. Your language, you have to be very careful about your language. And they were a mirror for me. And now I'm hyper aware of it and I actually catch myself in it. So I had said, oh, like I might do this. They go, no, you will. So I started to be like, you're right. I will do blank. Instead of I might do blank, I could do blank. And it's like, no, you will. And so that was a small area just in the last week that I've become aware of. And so now I'm very conscious of, okay, like what language am I using? And I find myself deleting text messages now to people because I want to change my language, because I recognize that my language is programming my subconscious. And if it's programming my subconscious, that's going to determine what I'm consciously experiencing day to day. So again, this is something that wasn't like a massive problem. It's not like I had fires happening day to day because of the could versus would versus will in my language. It's not that that was consciously happening to me every day. And I'm like, I gotta fix this. It's a skill that I recognize that if I don't consciously look to develop this and be aware of it and make change in it, it is going to change me whether I realize it or not. And so I am always looking at how can I be better? And for you, there may be areas right now where you're like, I really want to refine blank. Or are there maybe even areas that you're kind of, internally, you have this voice that you almost know you need to develop it, but you've been shoving it under the rug or you've been postponing it for a later date when things quote unquote calm down. And I've been there. I've had the moments where I tell myself, like, oh, this is just not a right now thing. It's not that big of a deal, right? Personal development is seeing it, honoring it, and doing something about it before it becomes a problem. Personal development can happen absolutely when a problem happens and you have to be able to respond to it. But I think the really successful entrepreneurs are the people who are preventative. They seek to develop before the problem occurs because it allows them to constantly be ahead of the game and have this edge on this process that we're all going through. Now, in connection to personal development, there's also the aspect of people skills. And I will say that I think the ability to connect with people and network and build relationships is probably one of the most influential skills that you can have. Because relationships, by the way, are like, we're not talking about this in the sense of like followers. I'm talking about this in the sense of when you meet somebody and how you handle that relationship after you guys are done with your meeting and interacting. How do you really develop relationships? And this is also, by the way, with team, it can be with peers, it can be with clients, and really looking at, are you somebody who, number one, does actively seek to create relationships? And two, do you have the skills to consistently facilitate those and deepen those relationships ongoing? And when I see somebody who kind of has this belief of like they're going to lock themselves almost like in a little box and go build their business, it's like, oh, it's me, my headphones, and my laptop, and it's just going to be me, over here, head down, building the business. Well, truthfully, you're not going to do this alone. You can do quite a bit in your little office at home, but frankly, the ability to have a network of entrepreneurs is truly profound when it becomes the moments when you're scaling and you really need that support system around you. I could not do what I'm doing today if I didn't have the people that I have around me. And so I think one of the best things you can do to support your journey as an entrepreneur, and one of the best skills you can have that's going to serve you, is the ability to create relationships and also make sure that you have depth and nurturing of those relationships. And this is going to look different in different instances, right? Like I have some entrepreneurs that I talk to basically every single week, and I have other people in my circle that I talk to once a month or once a quarter. And the relationships may vary in the sense of the levels of intensity or depth that you have with them. But the thing that I think is really important is that you actually seek to develop that skill, because you can be introvert in the sense of the fact you don't have to be like a constant, life of the party by any means, but you do have to put yourself out there. And it's when I see business owners who think that they're never going to leave their home, they're never going to speak to a soul, and they're going to build this massive empire. Technically, could you from your laptop? Sure, but it's going to be 10 times, 15, 20 times harder because a lot of what I've been able to achieve is because of people who support me and also me being a support for other people in the exact same situation. And I honestly, going into entrepreneurship, thought I was introvert. Like I was like, I was so, and when I say so nervous, I was so nervous going to events. I hated networking. I hated connecting with people. I did not like conferences. Like I was somebody who was like, I want to hide in the washroom. This is not for me. And I found it really drained me. And now when I go to events, I'm so excited to meet new people because I recognize that those relationships and those dynamics, not only am I going to learn so much from them, but I also have met some of the closest friends that I have today through events, through social media, through business. And that was because I opened myself up to creating those connections. And I think so many business owners isolate themselves in the belief that either they don't feel safe to share with other people. There's this aspect of like competition. I can't kind of let people know that I'm struggling or let people know that I'm, thinking or feeling XYZ. And my biggest suggestion to you is to please let people in. Please let some people in because the people in my world have been such a catalyst for my growth. And not even necessarily in the sense that I need them to do something for me, but just the fact that they're there. They're emotionally and mentally there for me. And that creates space for me that in turn allows me to know what I need to do next and what I want to act on. So, when it comes to this kind of softer skills, communication and relationship building and all of these aspects, we need to know how to create relationships. We need to know how to put ourselves out there and get to those events and create those connections. We need to know how to have those conversations that are intentional and build our network and build the people that are going to be our little community of support as we go through this journey. You should not be going through this entrepreneur journey alone. And it's your ability to build your network that's actually going to be your net worth. And I know it's that classic saying, right? But it really is so much about who you know. So many focus on what we know and what is the information that I need to know in order to grow. And it's like, but also who do you need to know? And this is why I'm such a big advocate for networking and for business mentorship as well, is because the people I've surrounded myself with have been a massive catalyst for my success because they also have networks of their own that I'm able to tap into. And so, really asking yourself, are you putting yourself out there? Are you building relationships? Or are you laptop lifestyle, you and your headphones in your office and potentially haven't made a real, genuine, authentic connection in a little while? And so maybe this can be your invitation to go and message somebody that you saw at an event. Go message somebody that you met through the internet. Go actually create an intentional, authentic connection with somebody. The other thing that is also a massive skill as an entrepreneur that I think truly is an absolute non negotiable is emotional regulation. Because, oh my goodness, this journey is a lot emotionally. Okay. I'll be the first to say it. I'm going to call it what it is. It's a lot. It's a lot of highs and it's a lot of celebration and it's a lot of, incredible ecstasy when it comes to the wins and all of the things that are possible through this beautiful online space. But there's also a lot of lows. And so I think it's the ability to be able to regulate our emotions, to be able to work the middle. That is really where most entrepreneurs are going to be the most successful. I had moments I remember in business where something would happen and I would get rocked. And I mean rocked emotionally for like probably anywhere between 3 to 7 days, sometimes 10 days when something would happen. It would just ruminate in me. And that was because, frankly, I didn't have tools to actually emotionally regulate. I didn't have any tools to process. I didn't have any tools to de escalate anything that I was feeling. I just sat in it, it just stayed stuck. And one of the best quotes that I heard recently was that if it's coming up, it's coming out. And if something was feeling that it needed to be processed through me, it was this intention of actually releasing that and also giving myself tools to intentionally release that because your emotions cannot run the show in your business. Your emotions are going to be high and low, and we can't have your results and your experience in your business, not only for your team, your clients, everybody. We can't have your experience in the business be high and low based off your emotions being high and low. Because frankly, if we did that, it would be quite a ride for everybody who's on it because our emotions are so up and down, which is normal, which is normal. And so the best thing that helped me in business and really has been such a great reminder recently was the fact that the emotions that we have are just simply emotions. Typically, emotions last for about 90 seconds in an actual instance when they occur. How long they last after that is really our choice of how long we decide to keep them around, i.e., what story we're giving to those emotions that allow them to persist. And so when I think about emotional regulation as a skill as an entrepreneur, it really is the difference when you have an issue with the team or an issue with a client or even, frankly, overwhelm, right? When you're going and you're doing all these things and you have this list of all these things you're working on, the overwhelm that you have and being able to process that. Too many business owners let their emotions stay stuck inside. And because of that, they build up and they build up and they build up. And one day it just completely releases. Oftentimes, frankly, at times that you don't want it to release. The best tool you can give yourself is the skill of being able to not only understand and identify emotions that you're feeling, but two, giving yourself tools, methods, and processes and practices that allow you to effectively release those as part of a schedule and a habit, not as something that you feel you need to completely blow up in order for these to come out. And I used to have a negative connotation, frankly, with emotion because I was like, if I'm crying, something must be wrong. Or if I feel this way, there's something that's a disconnect. Something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. And what was so helpful for me was realizing that emotions are literally just a release. If you are feeling the need to cry, or you're feeling antsy, or you're feeling anxious, right? Asking yourself, okay, is there a story to this? Or is this just literally a feeling I need to get through my body? Just the same feeling as adrenaline or nerves for a first date. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It's just a feeling that your body is having. And so the ability and tools that you have, the skill to understand your emotions and also be able to have practices to regulate them, either if you're high to be able to neutralize them or if you're low to be able to increase them, both are essential skills you need to have because this is a very emotional process. I will be the first to say. And it's your tools that you have in your toolbox to navigate it that are the difference of how you're going to be able to handle it. And I often tell people this, you and I don't have different problems or emotions. I get sad, you get sad. I get angry, you get angry. I get frustrated, you get frustrated, right? But the difference of how we handle those emotions could be the difference of the solutions or the next steps that we take. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, I might have one client A who ends up putting Netflix on in bed and sits in bed for 4 days to use that as the tool that helps them to overcome it. Then I have person B who takes that and says, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to journal about it and I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get it out of my brain, number one, with a journal. Two, I'm going to go for a walk to change my state and move my body to create a physical state change. And then third, I'm going to go back to that journal when I'm neutral and when I'm non emotional to be able to understand where my mindset was at so I can make a decision for moving forward. And maybe you might already have predetermined who your support system is. And so you're going to call in on your support system to help you in those instances. So, do you see how laying in bed watching Netflix may not be the same as someone who has tools or a structure or a process to help them to navigate it? And so then we ask ourselves, well, wait a second, person A watching Netflix in bed took 3 or 4 days, whereas person B may have taken 3 or 4 hours. Who do you think is going to win in business? And this is the softer aspects that are really important as we scale. Not a lot of people are going to say, like, hey, you want to scale? Let's regulate your emotions, right? It's not something that a lot of us necessarily find sexy, but it is truly at the basic core of it what we need to really be able to sustain in this journey. Now, with that also is the aspect of another core skill being discipline. And I think it really is the ability for an entrepreneur and a business owner to be able to do what's necessary and not only what they want to do. And discipline also connects to that earlier aspect that we talked about of confidence, because confidence doesn't come from the ease of something. It comes from the doing and building the evidence that when you do it, what happens, and therefore building that trust in yourself. Discipline is something that is a muscle that needs to be constantly trained, and you have to put in the reps nonstop. Anytime that I hear, I don't want to, or I don't like to, right? A lot of business is discipline, i.e., doing things and executing on what we know to be necessary, regardless of the emotional state that may, for 90 seconds, come up at a given moment. I don't necessarily show up and jump out of bed every single day because I don't want to sleep. There may be many mornings that I feel like I could sleep in till 12 o'clock if I wanted to, but the discipline in me knows that there are things that I value and there's a vision that I am building, and that there are certain requirements of who I need to be and how I need to show up in order to be able to make that happen. And that vision happening is not, frankly, going to happen with me sleeping until 12 noon every single day. The habits of the person that I need to become are not correlated to that vision with that type of behavior. And so discipline is really a matter of doing what is necessary, not only doing what we desire. And I think truthfully, in the online world right now, we're in a really mixed message around this, because there's a lot of, if you don't vibe with it, don't do it. Like, it's your business. Do whatever you want, do whatever you feel. And listen, you are in the driver's seat. So you're right. You have full independence to do whatever it is you want to do. But what I also know about you is that you have really big goals, and that you are not somebody who's willing to compromise on what you know you have in you as potential. And every time that you succumb to doing the easier thing, you basically are setting yourself back one step and another step and another step from where it is that you want to be. You're not someone who has done this because you want the easy route and it's the path of least resistance. You're tough. You have work ethic. You have persistence in what you're doing. You've already been putting in the reps. And so because of that, you need to realize that this is work. This is discipline. This is going to the gym when you don't feel like going. It is selling every day when you don't maybe feel like showing up. It's getting on the call that you really wish you maybe didn't have today. It's the ability to show up in those moments that are the real reason that you're going to have the future that you're going to have. If it was easy, everyone would do it. This is your invitation to really say, how do I, as Rachel Hollis would say, embrace the suck? How do I really embrace that this is the way? I can tell you, discipline to me at its basic definition is realizing there's no way around it but through. There's no way around eating healthy and going to the gym to change your physique. You just got to do it. There's no way around having that tough conversation with that client that you may have right now. It's just getting on the Zoom call and doing it. There's no way around having to not make content and not show up and not film and not this. You just got to do it. And the reason you do it is because you and I both know that that's required of the type of person and the type of business that you want to have. And so the best skill you can have is to not take your actions entirely from desires and feeling all of the time. We need to honor how we're feeling. And if you need a break and if you need something from your business, be aware of that. We don't ever want you to completely ignore your feelings, but we also don't want every decision that you make being based off of that. Because if so, what's really and who is really in the driver's seat? So the other skill that we're going to also dive into is anticipating problems and how to really look at problem solving in general, because you need to be somebody who is solution oriented. If you come to me and you're having an issue in your business, and the first thing that I hear is, well, that's not going to work, and that's not going to work, and I can't do that, and that's not working, and that's not working. Let's press pause and we're going to come back to it. And what I want you to do is I want you to tell me all the ways or solutions that you have in your mind of what you might want to try or to test that could work. Because if all you see is roadblocks, then great, we're not going to get a lot of movement. We're not going to be solving a lot of problems. Instead, if we can look to the different situations that we have and seek to solve as our main mindset, it allows us to see the different pathways. And so the thing that I think at moments we can go in, if we are setting the frame with a problem, let's just say you have a situation that comes up and you say to yourself, listen, I want to pick this apart and I want to find all the things that might not work with this. I'm trying to consciously do this because I want to be aware when they happen. That's fine. But if you're going to go into every problem only seeing what's not working, you're not going to find a lot of solutions. And so your perspective when problems happen is really a key indicator of your success long term. Because if I get on a call with a client and they are really ruminating on a problem, so they're telling me this didn't work and that didn't work, I would say, okay, seek the solution. What would you recommend? And so if you could only try to find the positive, if you could only try to find what could work, what would you say if you couldn't mention anything negative? And so that already in itself, because of the mindset or the perspective or state change, will already change the answer that you're going to get. But the other thing that's important when it comes to problem solving is also specifically, what do you believe to be true about the word problem? Because the word problem, to me, again, going back to the classic motto, if it's an obstacle, it's an opportunity, is a perspective around problems. I don't not acknowledge that roadblocks occur. Roadblocks occur, they're everywhere in business. But how you see the problem is really the difference of your experience around it. And the difference of your experience around it determines the different outcome that you're going to see or the solutions or pathways that will be presented. So, for example, another quote can be, the problem is the path, right? So for me, I recognize that the problems that happen in our business are all invitations for my development. The only way that I create a process for a team member is when they didn't have a process and made a mistake because one didn't exist. That mistake happening is such a beautiful invitation for me to be like, great, let's get a process around this. Perfect. Instead of, well, why did this happen? And this didn't happen the way it was supposed to. And that didn't go the way that I wanted. You can ruminate on the problem, or you can find the path that it was designed to solve for you. It created a path. The question is more a matter of whether you want to see it or not. And so when we're going into problems, we need to look at two things. Number one, what do we believe to be true about problems? When they occur, what do they mean to you? What do they represent? What is a symbol of a problem to you? What is that when you experience and someone says, hey, problem, what do you feel when I say that? And second, when you go into solving a problem, what is your perspective when you solve it? Do you go in with the mindset of solutions and invitations and opportunities, or are you going into this won't work? See, this is evidence that it's not going to happen. See, this is what always goes on in the business. How you believe the definition of problems to be and the perspective you have when they occur are two skills that are really, really important for you to harness, because the growing of a business is not the absence of problems. If anything, the problems are going to get more frequent and they're going to get bigger as you get bigger. And so instead, we need to start to train you on how you're going to understand problems and also how you respond to them. Now, the last two, this one is extremely important. If I could say of this list, this is probably one of the top that I would say you're going to want to harness, that you're going to want to focus on. And it is communication, because communication is integrated in everything in the business. It's in copy, it's in video, it's with your team, it's in sales. It's both verbal communication and it's also nonverbal communication. Nonverbal, you can have, for example, it could be written copy, it could be video and you speaking, and it can also be your body language and your eye contact and the way in which you communicate with your body language. I was actually just last week watching someone's sales call, and they said, we feel like we're making really great progress with the way that we do our sales, like they're closing, things are feeling more flow. And I'm like, absolutely. But everything you're saying is great. Your body language is telling a very different story. And so it's important for us to realize that when we're on a meeting with a client or we're on a meeting with a team member or we're even just in our marketing, our body language and the way that we show up does create a totally separate, different narrative than whatever it is that's coming out of our mouth. And so there's two aspects of communication that I would love for you to really dive into, which is nonverbal and verbal. Most people focus on the verbal, which is how I write, how I speak, how I communicate with my audience, my team, my clients. But the other aspect is the nonverbal. And so, for example, one of the aspects that I really, and it's going to sound a little quirky, but one of the things that I'm really diving into right now is eye contact. I had an experience through coaching myself, like I was on the client side, and I realized the impact of eye contact. This was not anything that was being said, it wasn't anything that was being taught, it had nothing to do with that. It had to be with the fact that there was two things that really were landing for me was space, i.e. not speaking, and the ability for space to really allow things to land. And two was eye contact. And I started to ask myself, well, how am I with eye contact? Am I looking at the camera as much as I should when I'm filming so you can really say, hey, she's like speaking right to me? Am I looking you in the eye or am I looking away when I'm on a Zoom call? Am I looking you right in the eye when I'm in person with you at an event and we're connecting? And so it was small little pieces like that, though, that I realized by being on the client side were so impactful for me to really allow the verbal message to land. And so again, the verbal message was already being effectively communicated, but then when being complemented by the nonverbal, landed at such a deep level. And so for myself, my current skill that I'm sharpening right now is actually my nonverbal communication, my body language, my eye contact, the ability to have space and not speak. Those are aspects that I'm really diving into. But the communication side of what you say is essential. It is your copy and your captions. It's you on video. It's you on sales calls. It's you coaching clients. It's you coaching and developing your team. You and your ability to communicate is the main way of which you're going to create the impact that you desire in this business. And so it really is also ensuring that when you're delivering a message, do we actually know and can we have confidence that that message is being received in the way in which we intended it? And so that really all stems down to communication. And so it's one thing to say, do I know how to communicate? So learning the skills on how to effectively communicate messages. But then two, ensuring when I communicate, is my audience receiving it? The team, the clients, your social media audience, are they actually receiving it and integrating that message? And if they're not, going back to those skills and sharpening those. And so I think communication is absolutely essential. And I think the last being time management, because so many are like, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And in business, the one thing that I can tell you is none of us get more time. You have the same amount of time as someone who has 4 times the size of business as you. And if you even have a peer right now that has a certain type of business or a style that you want, you and I both have the same amount of hours in a day as other people do in their business. And you might say to yourself, well, Kate, that's easy to say. They have big teams now. Great, but they didn't always. They didn't always. You and I have the same amount of time in a day. And the person you look up to also has the same amount of hours in a day. The only difference is how they use them. And so if you are at a place right now where you feel like you're not where you want to be, it is not a matter of you needing more hours. You don't necessarily need a longer day. You need to be able to understand how to manage the time of the current day that you have and to be able to navigate the hours you're already putting in to get different outcomes. And so, truthfully, I used to believe for a long time, I was like, I just need more time. I just need more time. But it's like when you really think about it, it actually is a broken model for your business because if you need more time and we have capped amount of time, naturally that means that your business is always capped. So, scaling is really not about having more time. Scaling is a matter of understanding how do we take the same 8 hours and have those same 8 hours of work at stage one generate 6 figures, and those same 8 hours generate multiple six, and those same 8 hours generate seven, and those same 8 hours generate multiple seven. And that's what happened in my journey. I had the exact same amount of hours. It was understanding how to really triage my business, i.e., looking at what was going on and saying, okay, that's kind of like a priority one, priority two, priority three. And by going through all of this, I started to realize how I could really break it down to be able to see what was actually important because I wasn't going to get more hours. And truthfully, if you don't have the skill of being able to break down those hours, you can't tap into the next level. Because simply just burning the midnight oil for your business is not going to be the thing that helps you to really 3, 4, 5x your business. So it's really about optimization and refinement of the hours that you have that I think is really the essential aspect for people who want to be successful long term. So we're going to give you a quick summary here, okay? And I think as I'm going through this, I'm like, I'm going to need a part 2 on this because there's definitely more skills that we did not get to today. Number 1, skills for non-negotiable skills as an entrepreneur, taking calculated risks. You then have to have the ability to handle feedback and criticism. 3, the ability to be adaptable. 4, vision focused and having a long-term vision that you're constantly tapping into. 5, ongoing personal and professional development. 6, having the ability to generate relationships and nurture and deepen those relationships. 7, having the ability to regulate your emotions consistently. 8, discipline and being able to do things when you don't want to do them. 9, the ability to anticipate problems and also be able to effectively understand what a problem is and how your emotions or perspective is when you're experiencing them. 10, the ability to have good written and verbal communication and nonverbal communication. And lastly, the ability to be a time management expert. So, as I said, these are just some of the different skills that I know that I myself have tried to work really, really hard on and still am very much in practice of and sharpening my skills to this moment. And we probably will have a part 2 at this at some point because there's definitely more to dive into. But I hope today was helpful for you. And I would be really curious for you. And again, like I would love to hear from you. If you want to shoot me a message on Instagram, what was the skill that really resonated with you? Was there one that you're feeling like, you know what, that's one that I've been neglecting, or that's one that I haven't spent as much time on and I really kind of want to circle back to? I would love to hear from you as to, in hearing these different non-negotiable entrepreneur skills today, which one do you feel is the area that you're really excited to dive into most? And again, I really want to remind you that this isn't a finished practice. Okay. This is something that is always ongoing. It is an ongoing development. You are never going to be quote unquote done. And so this is something that if you're going through and you're like, man, I feel like I got to adjust on some of these, or if not potentially most of these, that's okay. That's exciting. That means that you have tons of opportunity for development. And that when you start to integrate these, your business is only going to be bigger than it is today. And so I would love to hear from this list today what resonated with you and which skill you're going to be implementing. And on that note, we will see you next week. And as always, stay ambitious.